What's going on, guys? JPS back for another video, and today we're going to be reacting to why American companies usually fail in Europe. And this is a bit of a piggyback video on my last one where I reacted to basic worker rights in Germany. And I know that there are some distinctions specific to Germany relating to worker rights, but many of those have a lot of parallels with other countries in Germany, and that in general, the baseline for worker rights in Europe absolutely destroys the rights. Like, we don't have any rights in the United States. So with that, there was talk about how when American companies visit Germany and Europe, they're faced with a lot of challenges because they actually have to treat their employees right, and they have to go through a lot of legislation to make sure the proper measures are being taken to do so. So that's why, I'm not saying that's why they fail. There's other reasons, of course, but I think that's one of the big reasons. And today we're going to be getting into that. Of course, Walmart is the biggest corporation that failed in Germany. I don't know if they tried to go around other countries in Europe as well, but that was extremely embarrassing for them. And we're going to find out some more about this topic. American companies trying to translate their businesses into Europe and have success from that. But ultimately, it's not an easy thing to do. And you have to really understand your market, and what works in Europe does not work in the United States. Two completely different worlds, really. So before we get into this, guys, I wanted to announce that I'm dropping some new merch for the summer, some football related to merch. One of them is going to be Paul the Octopus that predicted all of Germany's matches in the 2010 World Cup and several other teams as well. Mental to think that an octopus got all those right. If you gave a human that option, it's not going to happen. So there's some type of magic going on there. Then we have the Germany 7-1 victory over Brazil, which was massive. And then one related to a very special song many of you Germans will know. And then finally a shirt with all of the years that Germany has won the World Cup. So Germany-related football merch to get you guys right, sporting your country for this summer, which is, and the tournament is right around the corner as well. So thanks so much for all the support, guys. I appreciate you listening to me ramble to start this out. Let's get right into it. Here we go.
On the 30th of December 1997, America's largest grocery chain, and at the time the world's largest company, Walmart, opened its first store in Germany. At the grand unveiling, the company spokesperson announced this as the first step to taking the continent. But just 9 years later, after expanding to 85 stores across Germany, Walmart seized all its European operations, reporting losses of more than $1 billion. This was just one example of countless massive American companies who have tried to conquer Europe and failed. Staples tried in 1998, Home Depot in 2001, and even Best Buy in 2010. All of them failed. So what was it that they were doing wrong? After all, they came from the land of capitalism, had large budgets and enough experience to crush the competition, yet almost 9 times out of 10 they failed.
A retail giant is closing stores. Walmart plans to shut down 269 stores. Best Buy is laying off thousands of workers.
This chair is actually from Staples, or it might be from Office Depot, but still, Best Buy? I did not know that all these companies went in. Kind of crazy how a company goes in 2010 after seeing everyone fail in the early 2000s. That's a risky move. Didn't work out either.
Even though sales there are soaring.
In 2023, European customers spent more than $9 trillion, making the EU the second largest consumer market in the world, behind only the United States. To most people, this didn't really come as a surprise. After all, just like the US, multiple European countries rank among the wealthiest and most developed on the planet. And with similar populations and similar sized economies, you'd be forgiven for thinking Europe and America basically run the same ways. But in many ways, the two blocks couldn't be further apart. In 2023, about 700 million people lived in Europe, but only about 10% of them spoke English as their official language. Home to over 40 different languages, Europe is vastly different from the US. While something like language may seem trivial, this difference is just one of the many symptoms of something deeper. Something that explains why American companies struggle in Europe. In the 1960s, Dutch psychologist Geert Hofstede set out to answer a simple question. Why do people from different countries behave so differently? And by 1980, that work became known as Hofstede's Cultural Dimensions, a framework for understanding how culture shapes behaviour, broken down into 6 key dimensions. One of these dimensions, uncertainty avoidance, measures how comfortable a society is with unpredictability. And this is where things start to go wrong for American retailers. You see, in the US, uncertainty avoidance gets a score of about 46. This means Americans are generally more relaxed about rules, comfortable with experimentation, and okay figuring things out as they go. American companies also tend to operate the same way. They test things, pivot quickly, and then adapt on the fly. Some European countries like the UK also fall into this category, but move a bit to the east and that picture changes fast, with countries like Germany scoring as high as 65, meaning they prefer things spelled out, standardized and formal. So when American companies show up with their "we'll figure it out as we go" approach,
and this manifests itself in like our daily lives, like the punctuality, showing up on time. Germans, they want their plans to be laid out. The United States is kind of like, oh yeah, show up whenever, we'll figure it out once you get here. That is a complete. And when it comes to shopping and stuff, yeah.
German consumers often find this disturbing. In 1997, Walmart opened its first store in Germany, and just like its US locations, all employees were given the company handbook. It contained over 100 different rules, but in the culture section, there was one rule that took priority over everything else. Whenever a customer comes within 10 feet of you, you must look them in the eye, greet them, and ask them how you can help them. To Americans, this was considered good customer service, but to Germans, with their high uncertainty avoidance scores, shopping at Walmart was a disaster. The friendliness felt fake, the small talk intrusive, and constant smiling unprofessional. Customers thought, why is this stranger trying to talk to me? And in some cases, this friendliness was even misinterpreted as sexual advances. Instead of building trust, it created discomfort. And finally, after 9 years of poor sales, Walmart had to pull out of Germany. Another one of Hofstede's dimensions, long-term orientation, measures how societies balance tradition with change. Here, the US scores relatively low, which means Americans would generally replace old methods of doing things for newer, more efficient ones, something American companies have always been used to. Countries like the UK and Germany, however, which score much higher, tend to value long-standing traditions, established norms, and gradual change. In other words, they don't switch to new ways of doing things just because they're more efficient. And that brings us to Best Buy. In 2010, the American retail giant tried bringing big box stores to the UK. Their pitch? Bulk shopping was way more efficient. In the UK, however, shopping in small quantities had always been the norm, and with their tendency to stick with things like they already used to, Best Buy felt unnecessary. And after years of barely any business, Best Buy had no choice but to pack up and leave. Time and time again, American companies have struggled in Europe, not because their business models are bad, but because they kept trying to sell the American way of doing things to people who don't really care for it. It simply didn't work. But that didn't mean American success in Europe was entirely impossible. Once companies accepted that European consumer culture was fundamentally different, they stopped trying to copy and paste the American model, and started building Europe-specific playbooks instead, all in an effort to navigate those differences and cash in on the continent's vast consumer market. But as they quickly discovered, this was going to be easier said than done, because unlike what they were used to, Europe wasn't just another market. It was a collection of different values, cultures, and people that had just happened to share the same continent. In 1985, Domino's Pizza opened its first store in Europe, located in Bedfordshire, England. Unlike its US locations, which were mostly large restaurants, things in the UK were completely different. Brits didn't eat out nearly twice as much as Americans did, so instead of opening large suburban restaurants, Domino's focused on small stores in student-packed areas that prioritized delivery over dine-in. And it worked. By 1999, they'd expanded to over 200 stores, and in less than a decade, that number had more than doubled.
This is talking about the UK, though. The UK is not the same as, like, Europe, the rest of Europe, if you go further east. Because Brits are, I would say they're like the perfect intermediary between Europe and the United States in a lot of ways. They're very American. which they will not like me saying that, and I completely understand. But like compared to the average European, I feel like Brits are much more similar to. I don't know. They're kind of in between, but that's what I'm saying though. Like saying Domino's is popular in the UK, does that? I don't know if that really counts as Europe. UK is continentally Europe, but Brits would say that they're British, not European. They've said that already. So I wonder, why do these companies continue to just like bring their own formula in and not like actually try to read their audience? You know what I mean? And also think about it. When Best Buy first came to Europe, same thing when Walmart first came to Europe, they probably were extra harsh on their employees. Like, make sure you do this. We want to bring the Walmart way into Europe, or we want to really like transfer all of our cultures, practices, and ideas into the new run. So they probably were like extra outgoing and like, oh, hey, do you need any help with this? Like the managers were probably extra harsh on their employees, which, if we're going to be honest, that only made things worse. The fact that there was an article about like Walmart employees making sexual advances on a customer because of how, their fake friendliness can come across, I can see that. I don't even think that's an exaggeration at all. Like, to Germans, like, y'all don't want that BS small talk. It's so fake. We don't even really want it in the United States. We just pretend that we do because it's all an act. It's so weird. So weird.
Domino's perspective, the lesson was clear. They'd found a winning model. And for an American company, that meant one thing: scale it. You see, for decades,
Yeah.
These companies have been trained to replicate whatever works, and it all comes down to how the US is structured. With shared language, media, and consumer expectations, the US is more or less a unified market, so a strategy that works in one part of the country will almost always work everywhere else. This is why Walmart can roll out identical stores nationwide, why McDonald's sells the same menu in every state, and why Coca-Cola can use the same marketing campaign from California to Virginia. So when Domino's executives saw their delivery-first strategy take off in the UK, expanding it across Europe didn't feel risky, but instead like the next logical step. By 2012, they'd expanded to Germany, Switzerland, and Liechtenstein, and for a moment, it seemed like they'd cracked the code, up until it didn't.
Domino's Pizza is to close down all its stores in Italy. Shut down all of its locations in Italy. Domino's has reportedly...
Okay, I said this before, I'm pretty sure, because I've heard about this. Why would Domino's try and bring shitty American pizza to Italy? Are you kidding me? That is the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Closed its last branch after it failed to win over Italians with its mass-produced pizzas.
In 2015, Domino's entered Italy, the birthplace of pizza, with its European playbook, making pizzas as fast as possible and delivering it to people's doorsteps. But in Italy, pizza wasn't just another meal, it was their culture, something that had been crafted with care and eaten straight out of an oven. Domino's, of course, ignored this. After all, its European strategy was working in other parts of the continent, so why wouldn't it work here? Just 7 years later, the company collapsed, filed for bankruptcy, and shut down all 29 locations across the country, a fraction of the nearly 800 it had once projected. This One Europe strategy isn't exactly unique to Domino's either. In the 1980s, Coors, the American beer company, successfully expanded to the UK with its Turn It Loose advertising campaign. British consumers loved it, so they scaled the campaign to Spain. But when it launched, Turn It Loose was immediately interpreted as a common Spanish expression meaning suffering from diarrhea, and just like that, the brand image was destroyed. Time and time again, American companies have failed in Europe because they underestimate the time, money, and commitment required to succeed there. They treat Europe like the US, a collection of similar markets with minor variations, but in reality, Europe is far too diverse for this logic to work. In other words, a product that sells well, or a marketing campaign that resonates in one European country, won't necessarily work in another, even if they share a border. Many American companies...
And something about Coors, guys, there's a reason why every time they advertise it, there's always like icy mountains in the back and the beer is like covered in ice. It's because it is such terrible beer that if it is not ice freezing cold, it literally tastes like you just pissed in a can. I promise you, if you haven't tried Coors yet, keep it that way. It is a terrible beer. I would have loved to see some Spaniards' reactions to turn it loose, the saying. I didn't know that was whatever, a euphemism or the diarrhea thing. Like, I've never heard of that, but all these companies have to do, guys, okay, 1,000 euros, pay someone, fly them to Europe, or pay someone who's already in one of these countries and send them a bunch of the products, tell them how you're gonna advertise it, and tell them to ask their friends and give you honest feedback. All you have to do, just ask a local. Instead, they're going on with this big strategy. They're like, oh yeah, we're gonna get them. You have to add them to your team. You know what I'm saying? And you can't just copy and paste the formula. This video also is really making me realize like how similar all of the United States is. Like, yes, we have states are different. West Coast, East Coast, Southern. You guys are familiar with the different regions, but in reality, we are all very similar. Americans all think similarly, and that's why that copy-paste strategy works. They know in Europe, though, these companies know that you guys are speaking different languages in each country. There are different customs, traditions. People think differently. People look differently. Oh my God. Imagine comparing someone from Sweden to someone from like Croatia or like Turkey, anywhere. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's just like you got so many different people living in a very concentrated area geographically, especially compared to the US and the rest other places in the world. But that doesn't mean that they're all the same and that you can just bring your store in. So I've said this before, guys. It has given me immense joy learning about these failures coming from American corporations, because it's like a slap in the face, and these guys deserve a slap in the face. They got so much money and they just want more and more. It's all greed. So it's really nice when that greed hits them back. It's so satisfying. I can't.
Have struggled to adapt to this, and even when they recognise the problem, they often choose to ignore it, because building country-specific strategies is expensive, slow, and difficult to scale. But Europe hasn't responded to this resistance with indifference. As American companies try to force their methods into European markets, Europe pushes back.
Ooh.
And in 2024 alone, that pushback cost American companies more than $7 billion.
I know, yeah. The EU is having a field day with us. Tariffs. Wow. Data protection. Look, it's always the data, bro. All we do... American tech companies, all they want to do is know everything about us so they can sell it to the advertisers. And Europe takes their data seriously. You guys, consumer protection is there. Not the same in the US. Of course it is. Of course it's data. Of course.
American companies dominate globally, but fail in Europe, and it's not just because of cultural misunderstandings or bad strategies. It's that their entire business models are built around a version of capitalism that just doesn't exist there. In the US, capitalism has always been straightforward. For the most part, government stays out the way, creating an environment where companies can take more risks, expand more aggressively, and then take the most amount of profit possible, even though this sometimes means engaging in child labour. In Europe...
Oh yeah, they make sure the cobalt mined in the Congo isn't from children, really. And China owns all the mines. Listen, everyone knows. There's modern human slavery going on right now, and we're all benefiting from it, and no one stops it. So, you think the companies care? Good luck.
However, things are a little bit different. Capitalism does still exist, but the government steps in to balance growth against other priorities like worker protections, consumer rights, fair competition, and environmental standards. And even though the amount of regulation in Europe has recently been brought under scrutiny, for American companies this causes massive issues. In 1997, when Walmart entered Germany, it did the same thing that had made it successful in the US. It leveraged its relationship with manufacturers, got massive bulk discounts, and offered customers the lowest prices on the market. In less than a month, it received an official letter from the German government: raise prices or face penalties. You see, instead of trying to compete, German retailers simply reported Walmart to the authorities for selling products below cost. Walmart executives, who'd built their entire business on being able to offer the lowest prices, were left confused. To them, this was just competition, but in Germany it was a violation of fair competition laws. And complying didn't mean tweaking a few policies, it meant stripping away the very thing that made Walmart Walmart, its competitive pricing. After 9 years of struggling, it sold off all its stores, exiting with nearly $1 billion in losses. For decades, American companies have built their entire business models without strict regulations, controlling what they can and can't do. This has led to a situation whereby when said regulations are introduced, their entire business model falls apart. With labour laws that protect employees, Amazon can't cycle through workers to maintain a consistently motivated...
Which is just sad too. It really just exposes how there's not really anyone checking these corporations in the United States. They use an employee, and once the use is done, they ditch them, throw them to the side like nothing even happened. They make as much revenue as possible, pay as little taxes as possible. The guy up top, CEO, and all the executives keep as much as possible, and they pay the people below them as little as possible to keep them working. And then we got everyone's from India on these H-1B visas. Like, we are so cooked, guys.
Workforce like it does in the US. And with privacy laws that protect people's data, Meta can't bombard Europeans with targeted ads, its main revenue source. And with competition laws that protect smaller businesses, Walmart can't operate efficiently in Europe. And it's not just that these regulations exist, it's that they're actually enforced. Something American companies...
Huge point right there. You can have the regulations in place. We have laws in place, but are they enforced? No. There's way too much wiggle room, and everyone finds a loophole or a way to manipulate the law to work in their favor. But in Europe, in Germany, there's no loophole or this. It's this, and if you don't follow this, then you go bye-bye, basically.
All but used to. In 2023 alone, Meta was fined over $1 billion for violating privacy laws, Apple $500 million for anti-competitive practices, and Intel over $400 million for abusing its market position. In fact, Alphabet, Google's parent company, has been fined so many times by the EU that it now has a dedicated section for these fines in there.
Oh my God. Those are big fines too. Every one of them is billions.
Balance sheet. In the US, however, companies barely get punished for things like this. No fines, no breakups, no consequences. Where American capitalism rewards whoever can grow the fastest, European capitalism balances growth with social welfare. And while this means European companies are often less dominant than their American counterparts, that's always been the plan. It's about confronting the fact that their entire business model, the strategies, the tactics, and the competitive advantages that made them successful was designed for a version of capitalism that simply doesn't exist in Europe, and adapting would require becoming a fundamentally different company, which for most of them just isn't working. For decades, American companies have thrived on a simple formula, finding out what works and scaling it no matter the cost. But in Europe, things have always operated on a different logic, one where cultural nuances matter, where stability is valued over disruption, and where regulations exist, not to slow down businesses, but to protect the people those businesses serve. So for American companies to succeed in Europe, they must be willing to put in the work, because at the end of the day, Europe isn't a single market waiting to be conquered, it's a dozen different markets, each with its own language, culture, and way of doing business. And until American companies truly accept that, they'll keep making the same billion-dollar mistakes for years to come.
Wow. So first of all, this was a class video. Really enjoyed this. It wasn't just about the companies failing. This was really about like the laws that are in place that lead to the failures. I wonder what it would actually be like for an American company to come into European markets and be successful. It seems very difficult to do so because in Europe, it's not about business success. That's what these businesses' goals are, but that's not what it's about in Europe. You guys are putting the people first, and you have a better harmony between consumers and the businesses that are serving them. Like, it's a much more balanced way to do things, and I think it's so much more healthier, and leads to a better life for everyone. You know, you're not the people at in the companies aren't just, oh, how can we get more profits? Of course, that it's a business. Okay, that's going to be there, but it's not like how can we manipulate these people into giving us more money, and how can we get around some of the laws disallowing us from doing so? You know, it's not just like, it's not that game. Oh man, it's so sad, guys. It's so sad. Like the US and then the companies that are winning, those people have a ton of money. They're living in isolated, gated mansions out in the middle of nowhere. Meanwhile, average Joes, most of the American population is out here just struggling to get by. Just like going through like the differences in lifestyles is astonishing in the United States. And you really can't understand that until you actually come here and see it. And I am not suggesting that you guys should come visit the US. I know that that's not a very good idea for many of you and you probably don't want to. So I completely understand that. But if you really were to like be here and see it for your own eyes, I think a lot of dots would click because, you know, once you actually visit a place, you can see all of these things, how they run their business, how the country is set up. It comes into life in a physical form, and you could be like, "Wow, this country sucks." But yeah, guys, that's gonna wrap up the video. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.